33 tomorrow with a 50% chance of snow into the evening, partly sunny, and 36 on Sunday. Vernal and Uinta Basin will be partly sunny and 32 degrees today. 15 for low tonight with a 50% chance of snow. Then a 50% chance of snow again tomorrow with a high of 30, mostly sunny, and 31 on Sunday. Our key verse is Habakkuk 3:18, Yet I will exult in the Lord, I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. This is KEYY Provo, KEYR Richfield, KEYP Price, KEYV Vernal.
Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us here on the Key Radio Morning Show. Friend, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And guess what? It's just Corey and me and Mike. It's just the group, man.
It's still a party.
Corey, that's great. Is it a party? Yeah. Woo!
Yeah, we have donuts. It is a party.
Oh. My heart is just like, yay. Everybody should have donuts on a Friday. That's what I think. Celebrate the fact that you survived another week. Except for those of us who work right during the weekend and we're like, yeah, just shush. But I'll take the donuts. Oh, man. Things are going well, we hope, for you, friend. We're going to have a pretty delightful conversation. We're going to get into your homes today. That's kind of personal, isn't it? But that's what we're going to do. And it's going to be very practical, I have a feeling. And so be prepared to be challenged, as always. Can I be honest, though? Like, whenever I read the Bible, I'm like, oh, I'm really challenged here. So, I hope that it's as life-changing for you as it always is for me. Just going to say. Before we get started, I do want to let you know that on Monday, we're going to have Pastor Carl Wimmer joining us in the morning, and we're going to talk about, evangelism, which is like, that's your thing. That's your thing, Corey. So I'm going to be one of those that's just going to sit back and listen to you guys talk about the good old days at Liberty and whatever. No, it's going to be great. Again, still working on our recalibration series. But this Saturday, there's a lot of stuff happening tomorrow. And yesterday I mentioned that I could plan out your whole day for you. I'm going to do it again because tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., at Draper, Utah Christian Research Center is hosting their Saturday morning workshops and sessions. And this Saturday, Marv Cohen is going to be speaking on the evolution of LDS practice and revelations. And I think that will be a very informative and, can I say, kind-spirited conversation too, and it's that. That's what I really love about the Utah Christian Research Center is they're very kind-hearted. They like to talk about things. They'll talk about truth, and really just kind of have these really important dialogues. But they're always very kind and loving, and so I really appreciate them. So consider that, and that goes until 10:30 a.m. But then you got to hop in your car and you got to blast over to Salt Lake City at the at the Utah State Capitol because the National March for Life Utah division, I guess, I don't know, is going to be taking place at 11 a.m. at the state capitol. And this is just a way for people to join in something bigger than themselves and making a point to our government saying life matters. All life matters. And just saying, life is sacred and let's not try to make it look like it's disposable or that if it's inconvenient, we can just, can I just say this, kill. We don't want to be a nation of murder and of bloodshed. We want to be a nation that protects the vulnerable. And so this would be a very good thing to do that. And you'll probably find a lot of friends who are doing it as well.
Heather, if I could just throw in our conversation with Evangeline Sanders from the PRC last week, we got to send people back to that conversation. I think it was so good. She knows well what she's talking about. She's got a tender and compassionate heart. She's got a biblical gospel perspective on everything that she does. And so for those of you who might have missed it, or maybe even you did hear it, go back and listen again, because I think there was enough there. And we have these things where it's like a one day, which is awesome, go. But if you can't make it, don't feel like either A, you can't do anything, or B, that was your only chance. Like, go back. Yeah. Listen to what she had to say. There's some helpful resources. And so anyway, in light of that, I just wanted people to know, like, there's a bigger ongoing effort and conversation of how to love and protect not only the babies, but also the mothers, and to even feed into the lives of the fathers of these babies too.
Absolutely. And Also, I would just recommend you go to their website
Yeah.
and you could download or get on their newsletter mailing list, because that way you can also incorporate the needs and other things in your prayers for them as well. And then if it's, and let's just, whether it's the Genesis Pregnancy Resource Center, whether it's the Castle Country Pregnancy Resource Center, or it's the one in Salt Lake and in American Fork, friend, they need money. I'm just going to say they need volunteers and they need money. So just, consider opening your wallet and maybe even, can I just mention, maybe monthly giving for these amazing ministries, because they care about the whole person. So I'm just going to, was that a little blunt? I was just, okay, good. And then also our Night to Shine. This is something that is put on by the community of Vernal Christian Church. And every year they do this. Every year it gets bigger and bigger. What a blessing to all of those who attend, and also to the volunteers. Like this year, I think they have got a record number of people attending. And for that reason, they need a record number of volunteers to help out. So if you would love to just bless your community and bless other people, would you consider talking to Trudy Rubio, who is at the Vernal Christian Church, and say, listen, I don't know what you need, but I will sweep floors, I will open doors, whatever it takes, I'll help clean up, just something very practical, whatever you need. Let me be there and be a part of this amazing event, which has just been amazing. So I think that's all the information that I have. Mike Zander is also in the studio, our GM. And is there anything I need to know that to announce? Or are we good?
Oh, I don't think so, Heather. I think you got it all covered there.
Well,
a lot of announcements, a lot of stuff going on. It's exciting.
It really is, isn't it? And I just have to keep mentioning, I mean, we are a local radio station. We love you guys. We love you. We love you so much. And so we really want to just let you know what's going on in the community. And we want to pray for you when you need prayer. We want to rejoice with you when there's time of rejoicing. So just prayer at keyradio.org if you got a prayer request, by the way. So, okay. Recalibration, Corey.
Yep. We are working on it. We are going through just talking about things that we need as basic, honestly, in a lot of ways, basic foundational pieces of our lives, functions of daily and weekly and monthly, yearly living. So again, we've been contrasting it with resolutions, saying that resolutions seem to be, and I want to be careful on this, Heather, just as I say that, I think through my own thoughts, I do that every once in a while. Think through my own thoughts. Yeah, every once in a while that happens. But I wanted to just say, we are not bashing on the concept of resolutions in the sense that we recognize we need to make changes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking and really purposefully making a distinction between resolutions and recalibration. But if you're hearing us and you have resolutions, that's fine. We're just trying to say there's a biblical perspective that's different. And we're using a different word so that we can kind of express that there's a different perspective that we have as the backdrop. So just, if you like resolutions, that's fine. We're just trying to point you into the direction of something that's a little deeper, a little bit bigger picture perspective, and give you some tools to make these things be implemented into your life, not just we stopped 3 weeks in. And by the way, even in this series and in doing some reading for it, I didn't realize, how many days does it take to make a habit?
I think it's 13, isn't it?
Okay. So I've heard 13. Most of the time I've heard 21. That's kind of been what I've heard. I was doing some research.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually said that's not true. They said it's more like 60-something days, 66 days, I believe is the number, before it really becomes integrated. Now, I didn't spend time digging as to whether that was true or not, but I do think that if you have that mindset of 66 days versus 21 days going in, that can be a big difference. Because if you thought it was 21 and you're just good to go, I think it's a lot easier to get discouraged. But if you knew from the outset, here's a realistic expectation that this might take you a little longer to implement into your daily life and rhythm and who you are, then I think it might help us just have a long-term view of what's going on. So anyway.
I would agree. I think it's a much larger number than...
I know, but I want it to be 13 days.
Maybe for little things.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's true. I think I think there could be some variety, right? Like if it's a smaller thing. Yeah, makes sense. So,
okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that backup though, Mike, because I start evaluating when I read stuff like that. I think in my life, because everyone says 21 days, and if I'm 28 days in and I don't have it, I start feeling like, man, I'm a loser. I didn't get it done in the right time.
You're just starting your first round of challenges to that habit at that point, I think.
You see, on day 2, I've got my first round of challenges. Like, no, this is never going to work. No, but I think that's a good encouragement as well. And I think that also presses the point that we need people around us to encourage each other, right?
Yep.
Because, you can get into that slump. I mean, we think about weight loss a lot of times because health is important to people. But you get into the slump where you're like, is it even working? Like, is it, you get a plateau or whatever. And do I feel good or am I just miserable? And again, there's a lot to be said for this because even like when you are taking a multivitamin, for instance, or whatever it is, it actually takes 3 months for your body to adjust to those new dietary habits as well, because it's actually kind of going on a detox. And so it's kind of the same thing with everything that we're doing. So it does actually make a lot of sense that it would be 2 to 3 months.
So be patient
Nuts.
is what we're
trying to say.
Be patient and get someone who will, if not to come alongside you and do this with you, whatever that thing is, have somebody who's going to encourage you, who you can open up to and say, I'm really struggle bussing here. And then they'll say, you know what? Just keep swimming. Just like Dory the fish says, just keep swimming.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
So, hospitality.
Hospitality. Okay. First off, it's not I've got this book of spiritual disciplines in the Christian life by Donald S. Whitney. Excellent book. Hospitality is not in there.
Well,
I don't know if you noticed that.
I didn't know that.
Okay, but I thought hospitality is important, and I think that we've kind of gotten away from the whole idea of opening up our lives and our homes to people, not just strangers, but even to our own families, right? In fact, if you look at the way that we build houses, what's the first thing you see in a new house? It's it's the garage door, right? And there's no front porch. All the porches are out in the back, and then your back yard is fenced in. So we're protecting ourselves from our neighbors instead of opening ourselves up to our neighbors. In fact, so it's okay. I'm not saying, architecture, I'm not, but the whole idea is, what are we doing to kind of be aware of the fact that we're actually closing ourselves off from the neighborhood, from even our friends and our family. And it's not biblical.
No.
It's not biblical. In fact, throughout the Bible, all you see is people, good, bad, or indifferent. You do see expressions of hospitality throughout. In fact, if you look at, let's say, everybody's kind of upset about like Jesus, the birth of Jesus, right? And they're like, they had to go into this little stable area because there was no room for them at the end. And everyone's like, oh, where's the hospitality, right? So we know internally that we need to be hospitable, but we ourselves we're not aware of the fact that maybe we're not as hospitable as we should be. Yeah. And it's a biblical concept.
How about a definition, Heather?
Oh,
what do you have?
Okay,
That's a good place to start, isn't it?
I studied this. Hospitality. I downloaded just a quick. And Logan Murphy is the man who wrote this particular article. But he said hospitality is both action and affection. I thought that was a very interesting thing that he said. And I think that's just, and then he says, hospitality is the glad reception of the stranger. It engages the stranger with both our hands and our hearts. But that doesn't just stay with a stranger, but also to people we know, right? Yeah. So I liked the way he defined it.
That's good.
It's very wide. We think of hospitality as opening our door and inviting people into our house, where this definition is, okay, it could be right on the street. You're showing hospitality.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that's the thing is understanding the concept of what is taught in Scripture. So I think the literal way it breaks down in Greek is welcoming strangers, right? Now, I think, instinctively realize, to your point, Mike, that there's something about our homes that's a level of hospitality that is kind of, and I think culturally most of the time when we say hospitality, that's what we think of, right? Of course, we know the industry of hospitality is more welcoming people into your venue, right? Instead of just your house, it would be the venue, right? And you have hotels with entire parts of their staff dedicated to hospitality. But I think, to your point, Mike, at church, I can exercise hospitality when someone walks through the door and I don't see them or I don't, recognize them, and I'm like, hey, at that point, you're a stranger to me. Even if, in fact, I just met a couple at church this last week. They've been going for a year. Just met them. Okay.
My life story.
Right? But the point is for all of us is that moment of choosing to either say, oh, whatever, hi, and then just move on, or to say, hey, I'm inviting you into a conversation. I'm inviting you in. And again, personality differences. We're not it doesn't have to be, their whole life story. Like our kids, you might have one of our daughter, for example, she'll know everything. Like 2 conversations in, she knows people's birthdays. She knows, I don't even know how she does this, right? But then you might have our son who's like, I don't know, I met them and I think I know their name. They seem nice, but just by looking at, so the personality can be different, but to Mike's point, welcoming someone that you don't know into conversation, into the fold, so to speak, is something that doesn't necessarily require being in your home in the moment.
Yeah. And let's be a little real here. I mean, some people are like, I'm not a people person, or I'm an introvert, and okay, stop making excuses. And the reason why I say this, and I'm saying it to myself, okay, so we're all in this together here. But in Romans 12, there's a little heading that's not part of scripture, but it's nice to have it in it. And the editors here said, mark of the true Christian. And once upon a time, I went through a bunch of these, and it's like, let love be genuine, abhor what is evil. We're like, yeah, okay, that's good. Love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing honor. That's a mark of a true Christian. But you keep going down to 13, and then it says, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Notice it says, seek to show hospitality. It's not like an accident. And that's the reason why I look at passages like this and I think this is actually spiritual discipline. Because it's actually something that we have to discipline ourselves to do. Because normally we're like, someone knocks at the door and you're like, oh, do I have to get the door? I'll just pretend no, I'm a Christian. And you open the door like, hey, welcome, But we actually have to seek to be hospitable. I know people. Mike, you're laughing at me, but I know other people do it.
Well, let me just say this. We live in an Enneagram world, right? Which means what we do is we take personality tests, we take Enneagram, evaluations, and then we decide who we are based on those evaluations. But first of all, those are false a lot of times. The Enneagram, if you're listening to me, there might be I don't even know what Heather thinks about the Enneagram, but I'm just going to tell you there are a lot of weird, spiritual, demonic undertones to this thing, and the people who started it anyway. You can go check that out. Elisa Childers has a podcast on it that she does a fantastic job. So you can just look up Elisa Childers Enneagram, and she will break down, and she has a great guest on there who really unlock some of the things behind the scenes. So what we're not saying is that these aren't helpful tools, that they might not give you some perspective on things, but what we're saying is the Word of God is our measure. And if you notice, I cannot find anything about personality in the Word of God. I can see different personalities that are there. I can see how their personalities by studying the way that they interact or they communicate the different, we talk about the Word of God being written over 1,500 years in 3 different languages, 3 different continents by around 40 authors, right? Different personalities. You have shepherds, you have kings, you have priests, you have this whole gamut. You have a former tax collector, you have Luke's a doctor, right? So you have all these different personalities and backgrounds, but that's never highlighted. What's highlighted is the truth of who God is and who we are to be in response to who he is. And so I think that's particularly true in relationship to hospitality. And if we could jump from Romans 12 to let's do 1 Timothy chapter 3, because Heather and Mike, I'm not sure that a lot of people realize this, but God, when we talk about, there's a lot of questions about authority and particularly spiritual authority in our culture. People, they're abusive or whatever. And there are those that are, but just in general, the concept of authority. But the Bible actually gives requirements for what a pastor, or a bishop would be. And I want you to notice something that in chapter 3 of 1 Timothy, starting in verse 1, it says, this is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop or a pastor, we could use those interchangeably in this situation, he desires a good work. A bishop then, so you've got a good thing, but here's what God's expectations are to be in this role. They must be blameless. In other words, they must be a person, a man of character, Notice that they must be the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior. And what's that next word, Heather?
Hospitable.
Now that is crazy. Do people even realize that it is an expectation in the character of a man who is going to be a pastor that he is to be welcoming to strangers? And I just wanted to point that out. If we were to go to Titus chapter 1, Paul is giving Titus the qualifications of an elder, not only because he's ordained Titus as such himself, but he's telling Titus, you need to start ordaining other men to be pastors and continue the work. And notice what he says in verse 7, for a bishop, again, or a pastor, must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but
hospitable.
Hospitable. And so I bring that up as I was just thinking about that, reflecting this morning on these things, that the Lord has a welcoming heart, that we were all strangers before we came to know him, and his desire is to pull us close. His desire is to bring people who were alienated, who were strangers from the Lord, and to bring us near. And by the way, can we just say that this is the gospel, that we are not strangers who deserved to be brought near. We are not strangers who did something that, wow, look at Corey, I should probably have him as a friend. It's more like, that dude is selfish, that dude is prideful, that dude has issues. I love him anyway, and I'm going to go to the cross. What does Romans say? It says, there are people who will maybe die for a good person, but God demonstrates his love for us, and that while we were yet sinners, he died for us. And that is the idea of hospitality, to take strangers and reconcile them to themselves, to take someone who's a stranger to me and reconcile them to myself in a relationship. So it's gospel, right? Mm-hmm. I just think we don't always see that.
Oh, absolutely. But before, friend, you get a little bit like, oh, good, I'm off the hook because I'm not an overseer, a bishop, or a pastor or whatever. Go to 1 Peter. 4.
Yep.
Because there again, in case Romans 12 didn't get you, let's try this one. Show hospitality to one another. Here it is. Without grumbling. So this is a biblical concept, and this is, I think, the point that we're trying to make here. And we all have, can I just again encourage you, friend, if this is something that's kind of new to you and you're like, oh, I'm not that a hospitable person, keep listening. We're not trying to guilt you or anything, but isn't this what we do is we look at the Bible and we let the Bible speak to us about what God says, about how God wants us to be conformed to the image of his son, right? So it's really important that we let the Bible teach us and show us our warts and our scratches and our wounds and our whatever, right? And that's good. It's a very, very good thing. So, but we're talking about spiritual disciplines, right? We're talking about recalibrating our lives, recognizing, okay, there's a weakness here. We are called to be hospitable people because this is, again, I love how you said this is a response to what Christ has done for us. I mean, wow. So of course, this is an outpouring from our heart. And if you're feeling like I am grumbling, the first thing you do is you just go to the Lord and you say, Lord, okay, you see this, right? I'm not hiding anything from you. Obviously, I have an attitude adjustment needing to do this. And the Lord's going to do that, right? He does that supernaturally. It's amazing. Just keep praying and he's going to give you opportunities and it's going to be wonderful. And you trust him with that change. But we want to go that little step further then and encourage you to, again, seek opportunities to be hospitable. And it could look at a lot of different things. But again, it's not just the action, but it's the affection, right? And so we want to make sure that we are coming with a pure heart before the Lord.
Yeah, and I think, so again, we're always asking the Lord to give us these things, right? We were talking about prayer a few days ago, and I think one of the things that I appreciate in reading through some of the prayers from the Puritans is that it is in every single prayer that I've read so far, it's always an attitude of, Lord, this is not my natural heart. Please make it my heart because it is yours, right? And that's the mark. In fact, I was talking with somebody recently who said that they knew someone of a different faith, and they said this person was very devoted to their, so it was a friend of mine, and they were saying that, I know some people that are very devoted to a different faith. And you would think that as devoted and as serious as they are, that their life would look different. My response was, but that's because it's the Holy Spirit that really changes us. So we can do things to a certain degree in our religiosity. We can do things to a certain degree, even as an atheist, where you see certain ways that God has set up the world. We are made in God's image. We know goodness should be there. So we can do some of those things. In fact, that's the whole cultural message, right? be good without God.
Right.
Because humans are the good source. Humans are the best of everything. So we need to bring out the goodness from ourselves, right? But even that version of goodness, and it's there because we're created in God's image and because he's revealed himself to us, there is an element of that, right? But in terms of internal transformation, to your point, Heather, about this hospitality thing and about not grumbling, the point is I do naturally grumble. And here's why. Here's the word picture that comes to my mind. I think about, I want the fragrance in my home without the crushing of the thing that creates the fragrance, right? So let's say you did something as simple as, did you know, and I discovered this because someone at work every year for Christmas, they give people a little thing of like different spices and stuff, and then you put it in hot water and you boil it.
Was that potpourri?
Yeah, it's basically what it is, right? It's basically what it is.
You guys are
Was that a real word? What?
I think it's
That's
French.
true.
I don't know.
I always said potpourri, but maybe it was potpourri. I don't know.
No.
I'm just saying like it's spelled, I
It's
think.
spelled, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
I didn't mean to distract you, Cora.
No, it's good. It's
Crush
good.
it. Crush it, baby.
But I think that really is the point, Mike, is, the crushing is where the fragrance comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we tend to want, and I say I include myself in this, we tend to want the fragrance of the sweetness of Christ and of the blessings that come from obedience without the crushing that it takes, the death to self that it takes to get there. And we treat this, we really act like this in every area of our life. Our marriages often are falling apart because I want the blessings of a deep, profoundly intimate and fruitful and wonderful relationship, but I don't want the sacrifices to get there. I don't want to have to humble myself and ask for forgiveness. I don't want to look at my wife in the eye and say, you were right and I was wrong. I don't want to have the conversation whenever I really feel like running the other direction, right? And so there's this, or how about with my children? It's easier just to turn on the TV than it is to have hard conversations, or it's easier to say, here, you know what, ask Google, right? Those are easier things to do, but then I get frustrated down the road when I don't have the relationship that I want with my kids. When I was teaching in elementary school, I remember we were reading through a book, and it was a totally secular book, but I think the kids, and they were 4th and 5th graders at this particular time in my teaching career, and this is public school. So I started asking them questions about what was being presented in this book. And it was, I don't even remember the name of the book, but it was a story basically of a father who neglected their child. And then as the child became an adult, the father got older and realized, I want a relationship with my kid. And the kid didn't want anything to do with them. So I asked my 4th and 5th grade little kids, like, what do you guys think about that? And it was amazing. Even these little 9 and 10-year-old boys and girls were very articulate in saying, well, if they don't want a relationship with me now, why would I want a relationship with them then? Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to hospitality, I want to not get too far off because we could really walk down that road. But to bring it back to hospitality, the same thing I think is true. Like, we want all the blessings of sweet friendships and knowing, like we call it church family, right? We do that. But if church family is just a title that we give because we know it's what it should be, but we're not willing to dig into the weeds of what that really takes and laying down our lives, then I think we're going to miss out. Because yes, it is a great sacrifice to die to myself, whatever this might look like in hospitality. Maybe for you, we can talk about specifically getting into homes, but Mike, like one of the ways that I think hospitality can be, let's just go to coffee. Mm-hmm. Can we just go to coffee? Like, that's no pressure. I don't have to prepare my house. You don't have to prepare yours. It's a public place. People go for coffee anyway. Can we just spend 30 minutes together talking and getting to know it? It seems like a non-pressure environment for the most part. Usually the ambiance is pretty nice in a coffee, right? But you're welcoming someone that you don't know. Even if you, by the way, I in reflecting on this a while back, a stranger could be someone that I've said hi to every Sunday for a year. Mm-hmm. They could still be a stranger because I know their name, I know who their kids are, and I know nothing about them. That could still be a stranger. And I'm going to coffee to welcome them into my life and say, let's change the fact that we don't really know each other.
Mm-hmm. So well said. So well said, and so convicting as well. Again, we always go back to Scripture, right, friend? Because that is our prime reality. And, when Jesus says, love one another, this is one way that we can do this, right? To invest. And really, this is an investment in people. And here's the other part of this. we need to invest in people who are different than us. Okay. We have little tribes, and there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with having your core group of friends. I mean, so it's not that at all. But we do need to open our hearts and to really take a look at the world around us and press into the different. Now, some of the different is going to be very unbiblical, right? Some people that maybe your neighbor who is just, down the road, maybe they're living a lifestyle that is completely different than what the Bible prescribes. But they're still people. They're still people that Jesus died for. And we have to understand that and look at people at a different mindset, because I think from there, your motivation then changes because you will have compassion on that person. Again, the gospel is what changes our hearts toward other people, especially who we deem to be unlovable. And let's face it, if we look in the mirror, oh, that's me. I'm unlovable. And yet, who were the people who invested in me? So this is kind of what we have to do. And that's a hard thing to do, especially in a culture that likes to divide us, right? We're always like saying, let's be more inclusive. And in so doing, we end up dividing ourselves even more because we're trying, like you said, we're trying to do it the world's way. God's way is much simpler, but it's a lot harder in many respects, because you gotta really literally die to yourself and to really think of one another as more important than yourself. And so we go before, again, the Lord, and we ask him to change our hearts, and he will. But be prepared, because it's not going to be an easy thing, right? And people are hard, and that's the other thing. We are so busy trying not to be hurt by people. We get hurt by our family, right? I don't want to get hurt by a complete stranger, right? I don't need that. I don't need that in my life. But we are to press into that. We can't be scaredy cats, right? Christians are supposed to not have fear, because perfect love casts out all fear. And that perfect love is not yours. It's Jesus's. And so if he's calling us to the one another's, guess what? We're gonna put on the full armor of God, and we're gonna press in, and we're gonna love people whether they love it or not.
It sounds like we're working through some of the obstacles. You were mentioning selfishness with your time, and you're just talking about fear. What are some of the other ones? I think of not just selfishness, but sort of
like an inconvenience, or
just something along that line where I'd lost it. I had it in my head.
But let's press into that, because there are so many of them, Mike. You're absolutely right.
I agree.
You're absolutely right. So we talked, selfishness, and we talked about fear. What about just not singing opportunities? I think we had this one thing with our kids when I was homeschooling them. They're little stinkers. But I'm like, the whole thing was identifying needs, because I was so tired of them like passing by like a plate that was on the counter that you just put it away. But that was a very practical thing. But I'm like, we got to open this up. Mike, I'm just going to embarrass you for a minute, but he's really good at this. We will be in a parking lot. He will see somebody struggling to put something in their car, and he's the first guy there to help out. Right? I'm sitting there staring at them, trying to figure out how they're going to figure this out. Right? And I'm like, wait, help them. Right? But the idea is to identify needs. And I think a lot of times we're kind of clouded because I don't think we mean to be a lot of times, but I think we just don't think about the other person and identifying, maybe I can be the solution to this problem. Right? So I think that's one, an unawareness of our need.
The one I was thinking of that totally left my mind for a moment was busyness.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Like, I don't have the margin in my life. I think you guys did earlier, I'm not here every day, so I think you talked about scheduling and margin and that sort of thing.
Right.
And if we don't have that, well, we're not going to have the time to set aside. And even when we stop and we are even not being busy for a moment, then we're needing to rest. So we just can't get it done.
Mike, I love what you're saying here, because actually, and I didn't say this yesterday when Pastor Danny was with us, just because the conversation I didn't want to take away from what we were talking about, but time is something that is precious, and it is something that I think, to your point, we don't even realize. We just are busy by nature, but it's also unique in human history, I think, the type of busy that we are. Because when you're busy all day in the fields and you can have your kids with you, or you can have a friend, or like you're busy together with a friend where you're digging a well, like I'm thinking of Laura Ingalls Wilder and how when she was a kid, her dad like did everything. That's a real life thing. And a neighbor would come. And then after they dug that well, then they would go back to the neighbor's house, and so they were busy. They worked all day. They were farmers. They were outside. But that type of busyness was together kind of busyness. We live in a culture where we're busy apart. And I think to your point, we have to recognize that busyness, yes, we need to be diligent, but we can be wrongly busy in a way, not even, again, ignorance. I think a lot of times we don't realize it just is what it is. But I just think you hit on something really profound, that we're not trying to pummel you and say, this is just one more thing. But what we are saying is it is a priority in life. And if we don't slow down from the busyness, from the rat race, in fact, I remember when I had to get my hip replaced a few years ago. So I'm in my 30s, have to get my hip replaced. It was awful. It was painful. It was 3 months. It laid me out, right? And one of the things that God really showed me during that time was, Corey, you're so busy that you don't even have time to hear my voice. And even in the times that you do hear, and I was still reading my Bible, doing like, it wasn't like that. I was serving him, busy for that. But he said, you, A, don't have enough time to even hear my voice. And B, in the times that you do hear my voice, you're so busy that you don't have time to slow down, repent, and make changes. And that's convicting to me. And so I think to our point here, what we're not saying is just add one more thing. What we are saying, though, is you might need to slow down, evaluate how busy you are, what type of busyness it is, and do there need to be some reprioritizing of things? Does there need to be some reprioritizing of things in order to make time for things that are more important?
I love this.
And as we think about what gives us a quality of life, relationships are very critical to that.
Yep.
And if we're ignoring that, then we're missing out on even having some aspect of our lives fulfilled. And God is relationship, and He's called us into a relationship with Him. And part of our task is to call others into that relationship as well with Him, but a relationship with us too, and all together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. I want to get into like, what does hospitality look like? Because now when we said it, you said, okay, the first thing you might think of is opening your home to all the people, or a hospitality, like you go to a hotel and they're like, welcome, give us your money. That's not really hospitality, by the way. But hospitality doesn't have to be where you open your home and you have to entertain everybody and have hors d'oeuvres and walk around and making sure their drinks are full, and then you have valet parking or whatever. That's entertainment. And we're not talking about entertainment. We're talking about hospitality. I was blessed because that was something that I was just really struggling with early on. Oh boy, a while ago now, because I was thinking entertainment and not hospitality until some woman, just a wonderful, wonderful friend, and she was. Hospitality is an entertainment, she said. It's giving people what you have already, what God has given you already. So when she has this little, it was a charcuterie board before that was popular, right? And so she said, when people come over, I just go in the fridge and whatever I had in there, I put it on this board. I had little ramekins on it. And she's like, I'm like, Ugh. So if there was like leftover pizza, she'd chop it up into little tiny squares and she'd put it on there. And it looked lovely, right? It didn't look like she just pulled out a Tupperware container and just plopped it in front of them. But it was like that's what she had, and that's what she offered. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. So it just changed my mindset. And then all of a sudden you can be really creative and understand what exactly is hospitality. What can I give people that I currently have, that God has given me? So basically what we're doing is we're stewarding the blessings that God has already given us and trying to bless others with that.
Yeah.
And that changes the whole mindset of what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Right? So I let me just say this too, is I have another friend and I just love her to death. Her name is Brittany. I'm just going to tell you who her name is because I just love her so much. But what she does is she has game nights.
Yep.
And at first it was in her home and it was really fun. But then more people started coming and her house was very small. And she's like, what am I going to do about this? So, and this is brilliant. And this is hospitality. She went to a friend who had a bigger home. And she said, listen, I want to put on a game night, but my home is too small for the people I want to invite. Can we do it at your house? And then now she's invited another person to be hospitable right alongside her.
Yep.
And they're like, absolutely. So
Yep.
my friend does the game stuff, but my other friend is just saying, hey,
Here's
have
my
at it.
house.
Here's my house. And then other people are like, well, I'll bring some sodas and da 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 da. And all of a sudden, everybody's enjoying
Yep.
hospitality together.
Yep.
And it's just, it's beautiful. And
It
it
is.
was that hard?
No.
No.
I mean,
So-
it took some effort.
It did.
But-
It did. Well, again, we have to seek opportunities. We have to seek to be hospitable. And that's exactly what my friend did. And she didn't let her home stop her.
Yep.
She was like, well, find someone else's. And I
Yep.
just love that. So does that make sense? Does that kind of help you with understanding it could be a very simple thing.
It could be. So let's do this, Heather. You've got the book underneath the Bible that I think everybody should read.
Oh, yes.
I really do. I'm not just saying that.
No, I agree.
What's it called?
The Gospel Comes with a House Key. It's written by Rosaria Butterfield.
Yeah.
An amazing woman.
It is. She really is. And she's actually helped me in a lot of things, engaging with cultural things. She's very gospel oriented. But there's something about Rosaria. She came out of a lesbian lifestyle, and she was an activist atheist. So that personality part of things, as far as just like her outgoingness and her God has brought into, of course, who she is as a follower of Christ. And so she's radical, she's intense. You'll read the book and you'll think, I'm a loser. Maybe I should just
That's
close
how I
the
felt
book.
when I
I
read
mean,
it.
you really do. So let me say this. Let's just say in two things that I think we need to understand before I kind of, go off of what you're saying, Heather. A, she will challenge you in a way that's healthy and good. Just like when we read the Word of God, we are challenged to stop sticking where we are and to go beyond ourselves. So that's a good thing. But B, she will challenge you because she is convinced that the way she's living it out is accurate, but it doesn't mean the way you apply it in your life is the same that you'll apply it in her life, or that the same way it looks for her 20 years into doing this versus the way it looked a few years into her doing it for yourself. So there is a gamut. We need to be challenged. We need to be pressed. I actually do think, I will say this, even though I don't think hospitality is limited to your house, I do think that there is something uniquely biblical and intimate and God ordained about hospitality in your home. And you and Mike, as an example, you guys, when missionaries will travel through, or you guys had some people that you ended up finding were your relatives, but you had never met them, and then you host them in your house, that's hospitality. So there are a variety of ways that this can be done. And whether it's big scale or small scale, I do think that there is, and especially going forward in our culture, Mike and Heather, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I think Christians opening up their homes, both to other believers so that we can get to know each other, but even to unbelievers, I think that type of radical biblical hospitality is the front line for the gospel. I really do think that it is. And Rosaria says it a little differently. I texted myself what she said. Hospitality is the front line of evangelism in a post-Christian world. And so we want these opportunities to change the world. We want the gospel to go forth. And again, what we don't want to be is legalistic and say, it must be in your home. It must, like you said, it must be entertaining. It must be the most beautiful backdrop. No. But what we don't want to go the other way is, in trying to avoid legalism, we don't want to avoid obedience and faithfulness to what God has called us to. And so there is a simplicity, I think. We talked about when we did our series leading up to Reformation Day, Halloween, we talked about the turquoise table. And that is a form of hospitality. She just took a turquoise table, stuck it in her front yard so that as people were walking by, they could get some lemonade. That is an example of hospitality. And so I think that there are ways we do hot dogs, orange juice, and donuts. Those are kind of so we'll do orange juice and donuts in the mornings, and we'll do hot dogs and chips in the evenings when we do it in our neighborhood. And it's simple. So, when we do that, we don't even necessarily have people in our homes, but we invite them, and donuts.
Yeah, Mike's like,
hand me that
hand me a-
hospitality.
Yeah, hand you the hospitality. Which flavor of hospitality do you want?
Donuts.
Yeah. I just love this idea. And do you see how simple, though, this really is? I mean, you just said that this is radical, and it kind of is, but it's like Rosaria put on kind of the subtitle of her book, Practicing Radically Ordinary Hospitality. And so this is just stuff, like, we just have to get into the practice of doing it. And again, this is the recalibration part of it, right? Just get in the practice of doing ordinary things for people. Do you ever notice that, there's there's that little song that says they will know that we are Christians by our love, right? Which is coming from the Bible, right? That we love one another. And they're supposed to look at us and see that, but that love has to be demonstrated, and it needs to be, but it needs to be ordinary too. Like if I walk out and I say, I'm going to do this amazing event only this one time in this year, everybody come. Do they think that I really love them? Mm-hmm. Or is it, I'm looking at my neighbor across the street and she's juggling 3 kids and I'm like, can I just come over for a minute, maybe watch them while you get some stuff done in your kitchen, right? And I don't even have to have the kids at my house. I'm only there for 20 minutes or whatever. Just give her a little bit of a break to get something done. That's hospitality, because now I'm offering my time. I'm offering my heart because I see that she's struggling. We don't normally think of that in terms of hospitality, but there is, and I agree with you, Corey, wholeheartedly, something very special about inviting somebody to your home and just saying, and like Rosario does, she it wasn't even that special. It was soup and bread, right? It's like, I just have a pot of soup and I just made some bread, and you don't even have to make it. You could just go to the store, right? That too is just saying, this is what I have. You want to eat? I had a couple friends come over, and it was just kind of spur of the moment. And I'm like, I'm just going to have hot dogs. And they're like, we love hot dogs. I'm like, oh, you're my people. But it's that kind of thing. Again, it doesn't have to be super. Maybe you just have Campbell soup. And it's like, okay, and it's comfort food. Great, but it's something you're sharing what God has already given you. And we got to get back in that practice. I don't know why we stopped. But I think a lot of it has to do with the busyness, the technology, the fact that we don't work in the same communities in which we live. I think a lot of that mobility, that Little House on the Prairie thing just doesn't, it's not a part of our lives anymore. And so we have to make extra efforts to do that. But if there's a random person knocking on your door for something, I know it's scary. Invite them in. Invite them in. Be wise, of course. Mike, you've given me a hard time. One time I invited somebody, and it was after reading this crazy book, by the way. And then there's this just random person, and I'm like, hey, come on in. It's cold. And Mike's like, you got to be a little wise about these things.
Microphone's off because I was eating a donut. But we've had a number of questionable characters in our house.
But do you trust the Lord? That's the other question.
Right.
If you're practicing something like hospitality, do you trust the Lord?
Yep.
Of course we want to be wise, okay? And there's got to be some ground rules and some boundaries, okay? That's normal.
Yep.
But I think we need to also just be a little bit radical in how we,
You mentioned technology, Heather. Is there a social media hospitality?
No.
No. No. There's and you know what? I think that there is a...
Can I do this remotely?
No.
Can I do this? I like digital hospitality. That's my version of it. But I think, so to your point, Mike, this is what we tend to do as people, right? So we talk about true worship. We try to follow that. We try to substitute false worship, but say that it's the same thing. We talk about true community. We try to substitute online community and call it the same thing. So there are aspects of it online that you can sort of emulate, if you will. But the real thing, the biblical nature, and by the way, Jesus did this. His life on earth, his ministry on earth were demonstration of hospitality, because what he did was he came in among strangers and he lived life, right? He lived it. He did not have to do it that way. He could have just simply come, accomplished his mission, and moved on, but he didn't. He welcomed, and you talk about the unruly people, man, those 12 dudes, that was not...
Well, and he fed thousands and made wine.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a whole gamut here. But I want to say this. John Maxwell said something interesting. He's written several books. He's a speaker. He's getting older now, so I don't know how much he goes out and speaks, but he said something that has really resonated with me. You can impress people from a distance. You can impact them up close. And as it relates to hospitality, I think that there's something that we could apply here. When I am inviting you in my home, I'm not here to impress you. That's not the purpose of biblical hospitality. You talked about entertainment. Entertainment is I'm impressing you, or I'm giving into some sort of pressure, social pressure to fit a certain mold. But I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to bless you. I'm here to welcome you. And yes, I do want you to feel welcome. There's a reason why coffee shops have the ambiance that they do. There's a welcoming, calming, relaxation piece of the puzzle that I don't think is unbiblical or ungodly. But what we're doing is, you talked about the act of hospitality and the affection of hospitality, right? But I think there's actually something in the middle as well that's a third piece of the puzzle, and that's the attitude of hospitality.
Another A, I'm so happy.
Right? and so the affection portion of it may not come first. That probably will often come last. The act is a decision that by faith and obedience, I choose to trust the Lord. The attitude is a life perspective that I am going to welcome people because Jesus has loved me. And the affection comes in that process. Because as I welcome people into my life that are uncomfortable, that are pokey, they poke me, guess what? I'm going to poke them back.
That's right.
Whether I mean to or not. And in that process, God is going to build me. It's shaping my character. It's shaping my understanding of the gospel. It's shaping my understanding of life and love and what these things are. And so this is not just, hey, I'm the spiritual goody two-shoes and I'm bringing you in to fix you. This is, in this process, I will learn to be like Christ. I will learn to love as he loved, not because I have it already, but because through the process, he's going to be transforming my own perspective and my own character and my own way of thinking along the way.
As you're speaking about Jesus's walk with us and his hospitality, do you ever notice when you're reading the accounts how many times he invites himself over to places? like I think about Zacchaeus, right? He's walking, and Zacchaeus is this short little guy and is a tax collector, and nobody likes him. But he's on a little tree, and he's like looking down, trying to see Jesus because he can't. And Jesus looks up and says, "I'm coming to your house." And I think,
I know where you live.
yeah.
Uh-oh.
But what have we ever considered, especially in today's day and age where we're so busy, to just go to somebody and say, hey, just walk over to their house, and maybe it's a stranger. I think if we're going to go with this hospitality thing and say, hey, stranger neighbor person, my name is Heather. I just want to let you know I live right over there, and maybe you bring some cookies and just say, listen, I just want to get to know you. Could I come in for a minute while we could chat? How weird would that be? But that used to be the normal, right? When and I think about my mom all the time when I talk to her, and she's like, hey, I just want to gab. And I think that's really funny today, because who gabs? Like, what does that even mean? But that was a pastime. My mom would go to someone's house, and they would sit down with a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and they would just sit
talk about that.
and at the kitchen table and talk.
Yep.
That was a pastime. And now we're like, I can't even be bothered to have a phone call. If you text me, great, I'm not going to answer your call. And that's the different mindset that we have nowadays. And I would just say we need to kind of press into the gabbing thing a little bit more. Maybe not so much as my mom does. She's really good at it. But, I mean, and I am too. But besides the point, do you see what I'm saying, though? Like, sometimes we have to go into the awkward and initiate the conversation, not waiting for people to come to our door. Yeah. That's what Jesus did. And you know what? It's actually quite a beautiful thing. And amazing things happen when Jesus did that.
Yep. And by gab, we don't mean gossip. So we're not,
right. Thank you.
I know you know that. I'm not saying that you are, but just to clarify, we don't mean gab and talk purposelessly or aimlessly. We mean that there's still an intention, but I don't have to have some sort of agenda. Well, we're going to talk about these 3 spiritual laws of, and do that. That's not what we're saying. You meet people where they're at. You're talking about their life. And you know what? Because as God's people, we're people of the book, so to speak, and the fragrance of God's Spirit in our hearts flows through our lips. So I can talk about a normal, what happened with your cat or your dog or your kids, and we still end up talking about the Lord along the way.
Absolutely.
And so I think that hospitality perspective, I love what you said there, Heather. Let me say this. Maybe that really is, because I understand personality way more than I used to. I'm an outgoing person, although I have a lot less energy, and I'm not nearly as outgoing as I used to be in a lot of ways. But it's probably hard for some people to believe. But I've learned over the years, as the Lord teaches me, like, okay, I get your personality. You're not a people person. That is okay. And your personality does not excuse you from obedience, but it might adjust the application of that obedience. So maybe for you, what you just described, Heather, cookies at a door, that's way too much. But you know what? It's not way too much for you to have a cup of coffee with someone. And if it is, okay, do it one time. Just find the person you feel the most comfortable with and just say, hey, could we grab coffee? Right? Let's fast forward to the house thing. Let's say you're along the way and you're thinking, I just can't do this. You could do it once a month. Some people might be able to do it once a week. Some people might be able to do it more. but you might only be a once a month, or maybe it's twice, 2 or 3 times a year, and you start there, but you can start somewhere. And so I think laying ourselves out before the Lord and saying, Lord, I'm committed to obedience. In 1 Peter 4, it's something very interesting. The very next thing that it talks about after have hospitality without grumbling is spiritual gifts.
Yep.
And so we talk about spiritual gifts. In fact, we actually had some of this conversation with Pastor Chad on Wednesday. And the idea is part of the way that we exercise the spiritual gifts organically, apart from the organized structure of the church, is by having people into our homes. And when God's people gather, the gifts are given an opportunity to shine. This person has the gift of giving. This person has the gift of compassion and mercy. This person has the gift of wisdom, and they see things that other people don't see. This person has the gift of serving, and they just love to serve. You invite people into your home, and you begin to get an opportunity for the spiritual gifts to be exercised and to be a delight as the Holy Spirit works among his people.
And again, friend, this always starts with the gospel, right? Christ was so hospitable to us. He came to us. Yeah. He came to us, put on flesh, dwelt among us, loved us immensely to the point of death, even death on the cross. But he did that for you and for me. Today, he's being hospitable to you. Today's that day of salvation. Go to Jesus and enjoy him forever. And then, friend, practice the hospitality that he has shown you.
Amen.
Oh, what a great conversation. This was a lot of fun. Friend, I hope this helped you out. Be hospitable. Have a great